Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the second of 3 videos where I'm modding this Rickenbacker to be more A, to my personal tastes, but B, to vintage specification. Now, I'm going to release these videos in reverse order, so you will have already seen this guitar in its final form, even though I haven't shot that video at the time of shooting this one. But in the first video, you saw me swapping the stock 330K all-round pots to the more vintage correct 250K log taper for the volumes and the 500K linear tapers for the tones. And we had some very subtle changes there. Now, I am going to be swapping the pickups in this guitar. These are the stock high gain pickups, and I'm going to be putting some kind of vintage correct toaster pickups in there. But I wanted to make this video before I do that, because at the moment this guitar has the stock Rickenbacker bridge in it, and it seems absolutely fine. I'm getting a few sort of buzzes and rattles from it, but looking at how it's made, I think that's kind of to be expected. But in this little tin here, amongst a bale of hay, by all accounts, I have an aftermarket Rickenbacker bridge made by Mastery. Now, Mastery are probably better known for making trem systems for Fender offsets, but they make this Rickenbacker bridge too. And one thing that I found this guitar to be a little bit lacking in is that kind of sheeny, chimey top end that we know and love with those vintage Rickenbacker sounds. And I have a suspicion that going from the high gains to the toasters will give me a lot more of what I'm looking for in that respect. But from everything I've read online at least, these Mastery bridges do give you a little bit of that as well. It makes it a little bit less plinky overall, but adds a little bit of sort of extra top to the guitar. So rather than gutting the pickups and swapping them out, can we just swap the bridge out? What difference does the Mastery bridge make over the standard Rickenbacker? Now, I was going to shoot this video after I fitted the toaster pickups, but these high gains have been kind of stock in Rickenbacker since the late 60s, and pretty much all Rickenbackers they make today have the high gain pickups in. So I thought it would be more relevant to more people to shoot this comparison between the stock bridge and the Mastery bridge with the high gains still in there. That's why this is video 2 of 3, and the final video will be doing the pickup changes with the Mastery bridge in it. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. Now today I'm going to do a little bit of clean playing, a little bit of gainy playing too, some rhythm, some leads, some sort of chunky chords, but I'm also going to play his guitar unplugged right at the start to see if there's an acoustic difference with the guitar not even going through an amplifier, because I think that should be quite revealing. So without further ado folks, here we go. folks. Now, please do comment underneath, let me know what you were hearing today, which of those bridges was your favourite and why. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks down in the comments section. So when it comes to comparing the Mastery bridge to the stock Ricky bridge then, I think there's two ways we can go about doing that. The first is in terms of tone, how did they actually sound compared to each other? But the second is in terms of how they're designed and built. So let's stick with sonics first and foremost then. What were we actually hearing? Well, with the Mastery bridge, I was hearing a little bit more of that kind of sheeny, trebly presence in the top end, but nowhere near as much as I was expecting given everything I've read online over the years. It was a very, very subtle change in the top end response. I think the stock Rickenbacker bridge was a little bit more spiky in the sort of mid-range and upper mid-range, in the way that the Mastery was slightly flatter in that band, but again, a very, very subtle difference. And I do think there was a slightly more substantial difference in the low end. The stock Rickenbacker bridge was kicking out more low end than the Mastery, which is either a good or a bad thing depending on which way you're wanting to go with the tone of your guitar. But I did feel that with the stock Rickenbacker bridge, especially on the neck pickup playing with gain, things were getting a little bit kind of mushy and soupy and undefined. Whereas with the Mastery bridge, because it has less low end, I was getting more, I'm not sure what the correct term is, probably sort of string note definition. I was hearing more of the individual notes when I was playing chords than I was with the Ricky bridge. But again, that's either a positive or a negative depending on what you're wanting your guitar to sound like. But overall, they were very, very close to each other in terms of tone, weren't they? And I would wager that if you're listening to this video on good studio monitors, you will hear those subtle changes. If you're listening to it on phone speakers or a laptop, you will probably think they sound exactly the same, because in so many ways they do. But I do think that's also partly the point, because the second way of comparing these two bridges is in terms of how they're designed. Now, I'm very well aware that there are people on Rickenbacker forums who are fiercely defensive of the stock Ricky bridge. And they say, if you want your guitar to sound like a Rickenbacker, why would you use anything other than a Rickenbacker bridge? And I do get that argument up to a point. But in terms of how they're designed, I think there are so many things about this Mastery that are, I'm hesitant to say improvements over the stock Ricky bridge, and please don't crucify me in the comments, but I'm going to go with improvements because it's just better thought out in many ways. Now, there is one thing about it that is arguably not quite as good as the stock bridge, because on the stock Ricky bridge you get 6 saddles and you can intonate each individual string, whereas with this Mastery you get these 2 blocks of 3, and the way you set the intonation is each block kind of pivots on 2 screws, so you can set the intonation of the high E and set the intonation of the G, for example, same for the lower 3 strings, and they kind of pivot around the B string. But as a result, there's no guarantees that the B is going to be set exactly right in terms of its intonation, because it's always going to be a compromise setting the outer 2 strings and just relying on the B being in the right place. And it's exactly the same as if you ever buy a traditional Telecaster bridge that has the saddles kind of adjusted for better intonation. It's the same principle. And I think these sorts of bridges work fantastically well when you're using a set of strings, like a set of 10s or a set of 11s. They're kind of compensated to work with the standard gauges. But for me, I use 12 through 64, so the top strings from a set of 12s going down to the low E from like a set of 15. So they're a very asymmetrical set of strings. And as a result, I do tend to struggle with bridges where you can't accurately intonate each individual string. But I do have to say I'm very impressed with how accurately this intonates, despite the fact that the middle string is something of a compromise. Now, there are slight sort of intonation discrepancies, but really not much, and nothing that affects playing the guitar and makes it sound seasick. I can see those changes on a strobe tuner, but on a TU2 it's straight up the middle. So we're talking a very, very slight compromise. I think the A string is a tiny bit flat and the low E is a tiny bit sharp, but really not much, and not enough to affect the playability of the guitar whatsoever. So I'm very impressed at how well this intonates even with my screwy strings. But in literally every other way, I think, the Mastery is just so much better thought out than the stock bridge. So with the stock Ricky bridge, I found that on the high E string, the string was fouling on the bridge. So it would come over the saddle and then kind of rest on the back edge of the bridge. And I suspect that's where some of the rattles and buzzers I was getting before were coming from, because those are all gone now I'm using the Mastery. There is a huge amount of clearance between string and back edge of the bridge with the Mastery that there just isn't on the stock bridge. With the stock Ricky bridge, you get the base plate on the guitar and it just kind of rests in place. There's 4 little kind of indents where the bridge sort of rests. So every time you change the strings, the bridge just falls off. And I have heard stories online of people strumming their guitar a bit too hard and the bridge just flying off into the distance because it's not held in place with anything other than the tension of the strings. Whereas with the Mastery, you get these 4 little grub screws in the base plate that bite onto the main screws and lock it in place. So you can set the action of the strings on the guitar and then bolt it in place so it never moves. So again, something of an improvement over the stock bridge. But I think the biggest improvement is the saddles, because on the stock Ricky bridge, most Ricky bridges come with these sort of vanity plates that fit over the saddles to hide them, and I do like to run my guitar with this plate in place. But a lot of people take them off because it helps you palm mute a bit better. You can get your fist much closer to the saddles to do better palm muting without that plate there. But the stock Ricky saddles are so pointy and sharp that I was forever ripping chunks of flesh out of my hand strumming without that plate in place, because they're so pointy they just dig into your fist. They're very uncomfortable. In comparison though, the Mastery saddles are silky smooth and they are just a much nicer playing experience if you're wanting to put your palm on the saddles. It's so comfortable compared to the stock saddles. So again, something of an improvement there if you're someone who likes to take that plate off and get your fist right on the bridge. It is just a much nicer playing experience with the Mastery. So I think for me, that's where the Mastery commands its price, because it gives you all of these improvements over the stock Rickenbacker bridge, aside from perhaps the intonation, but you don't compromise the tone in any way. They sound incredibly similar to the stock bridges, but you get all the benefits of this kind of improved design. So is it worth £200 to improve the tone of your guitar? No, not at all, because they sound so close to each other. I would struggle to tell a difference in a blindfolded test. But in terms of their design, bolting it to the guitar, having comfortable saddles, that's where it commands its price, I think. But those are just my thoughts, folks. Please do comment underneath and let me know yours. I love getting your thoughts and opinions on all this sort of stuff. So thank you for watching, folks. In part 3, we're going to be comparing these high gain pickups to a set of vintage correct toaster pickups from the Creamery, and that will be the last video in this kind of modding a Rickenbacker series. So it's been a lot of fun doing this, and I can't wait to bring you that final part in a few weeks. So thank you, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a huge difference when you hit subscribe, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.